Hi, this is Laura Clock coming to you from Jerry's Music in South Hadley. So let's talk just a little bit about maintenance, horn maintenance, and the tools that you'll need. I have my bag of tricks here, and in this bag I have several different kinds of oil and slide grease. I use a light oil for oiling the valves. I'm going to take off the valve caps. You want to make sure they're not too tight and won't come off. And I'm going to put just a drop. For me, I use the regular light valve oil for a drop on top of where the spindle sticks up. And I'll let that work in, and I'll put the cap back on. I do that to all four, or if you have a single horn, to all three of the valve caps. Then I'm going for a more thorough oiling. I'm going to take out a set of slides, and if I'm taking out my first valve slide, I'll hold down the first valve, hold down the thumb in first, empty the water as I go, and I'm going to drop the oil straight down in. Now you don't want to wash the slide grease down into the valve. That will clog it up. And there are methods of oiling the horn that will suggest putting the oil into the valve slide and then putting the horn down, putting this back in, tilting that way, and working the valve to get it that way. I think I have a pretty good aim, so I drop it straight down in. And you don't want to, I don't hold it over my lap, however, unless I have a chamois. You want to drop it straight down in, and I'm going to put 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 drops. Don't want to be stingy, because what we're trying to do is not just loosen the sludge that might be in there, but wash it on out. We can't wash it with water because that would make the valve internal might freeze up. So as a general maintenance, I'm not washing it with water, I'm washing it with oil. While it's in that direction, I'm going to move that paddle up and down. And then, again, without dumping it on my lap, I'm going to hold down the appropriate valves, put the slides back in. And I'll do that for all of the valve slides. Now, I have one that's a little bit noisy right now, and it tends to be, there's a little wear on that valve. So I'm going to take my other kind of oil. You can use, they make heavier oils. I like to use, this is a micro key oil for clarinets. Not all clarinet key oils are stiff enough for the right viscosity, but this micro key oil tends to work pretty well. Buffet used to make a clarinet key oil that was nice. I haven't found it recently. Or you can use sewing machine oil. What you want is a non-gumming light household oil. You don't want 3-in-1 because it has paraffin, which will tend to clog. And I'm going to put a drop of oil right in the crack between what stands still on the back and what moves out here. So I'm going to put, again, not holding over my lap, I'm going to try to get a drop right on the top of that crack and let it work its way down in. It'll take a little bit of time, but that's already considerably better. So that's where I use my heavy oil. If you have really noisy valves, there are people who will put that heavier oil on the caps here, underneath the valve caps, as opposed to the light oil that I use. The next thing you need is a slide grease, and since you are going to be emptying your horn rather frequently, you need to make sure the slides are well lubricated. I've been told by my repairman, so I try to do it. Every time I remove a slide, push it all the way in first, then pull it out, do whatever it is you're about to do, whether it's greasing the slide or emptying the water. And when you go to push it back in, again holding down the valve, push it all the way back in, and then pull it to the place where you've determined is the right place for your horn's tuning. That way, this little piece that always stays out to the air won't get corroded and won't be sticky, so that you wouldn't be able to change where you wanted to move the slide. I like to use the pink stuff, this tuning slide grease. There are many other things you can use. You can use Vaseline. You can use even cork grease, but both of those tend to wear off rather quickly. This stuff holds on pretty well. I don't like the container. It always splits on the bottom and ends up all in your bag of tricks. So I just put a piece of duct tape on the outside of it before it ever has a chance to crack. When you're using it, I'll go ahead and grease one slide for you. You want to wipe off whatever may be on there and get the slide clean. Then, if you shake this, you'll get the pink stuff to be down towards the tip and you won't have to squeeze quite as hard, less likely to break the bottom out. Just a little drop on each one is sufficient. You don't need a lot. You don't want it gumming everything up. And then just work it around with your finger. Put it back in the horn, and again holding down the slide. Put it back all the way in. Wipe off any extra. If you've got too much on there, it's going to make a bead of slide grease, and that's not helpful. So wipe that off, pull it back to where you want it, and you're good to go. So just a friendly reminder, based on experience, when you're going to grease the slides, at least at first, don't take them all out at once. I've actually had students, and one time a young colleague came in middle school and said, my horn is really out of tune and I can't figure out why. Well, she had taken everything out, cleaned her horn up nicely, and had reversed a couple of slides. They all are the same size in tubing internally, so they all would fit interchangeably, but of course they're not the same size and length, so they don't function the same. So my suggestion is, don't take them all out at once. Do a couple, put them back in, do a couple, put them back in, so that you don't end up with the wrong slide in the wrong place. If that should happen, however, what you need to know is the shortest slide goes in the F side of the horn. If you only have a single horn, the shortest slide on top, the next slide will be your first valve, and the longest would be your third valve. If you have a double horn, that same proportion holds, but the very shortest slide is going to be your underneath second, and then on top second, and then your underneath first and on top first, and then your underneath third and on top third. So just a friendly word of warning. Now, for repair, if something actually goes wrong, you're going to need some valve string. And you can get this at a repair shop. You can also go out and buy a roll of braided fishing line. It can't be monofilament, not the plastic stretchy stuff. It has to be braided fishing line. This particular one is 25-pound test. You don't want it much heavier than that. You don't want it wearing into the valves. Some of them are a little thicker, some are a little thinner. I like to keep at least a couple of pre-cut lengths of valve string in my case, because if a valve string breaks, you don't have use of that valve at all. It's good to know how to play natural horn, but you don't want to be doing it in the middle of a concert with a modern orchestra. So you can look online. There'll be lots of places that will demonstrate how to string a horn. It's a little complicated. I'm not going to unstring one of my valves right now for you, but if you have this with you and you've looked online, you can figure out how to do it. You can also, with only one breaks, which is usually what happens, you can follow the 8 from the figure 8 around things from how one is done and make it work for the other. So you want to have some valve string along. Valve string won't do you any good if you don't have a screwdriver, because unless you have mechanical valves where there are no strings, you're going to need a screwdriver to undo the screws that are holding the string in place. So keep a screwdriver handy. I like to have both a large and a small screwdriver, depending on the screw size on the back of your horn. You may need one for the post that's at the front, which you don't need to move to change a string, and the little screws that are holding the string down. You may also find that a cork has fallen out, and I suggest that you might buy or get your band director to buy some neoprene tubing or other replacement corks. You can use real cork, but frankly the corks that come in wine these days breaks up a lot and it's not so good. They make all kinds of either cork, corkine, which is a cork that's impregnated with neoprene, or straight neoprene or other rubbery type substances. It's not too springy, but it has enough give that when you put it in the spot at the back, where we call them the bumpers, where when you move your valve up and down, it hits on either side. This absorbs that. What you want to do, what I do, is cut a few that are about the right height. I happen to know which size tube works for my horn. They make larger diameter and smaller diameter neoprenes because not all horns have that same size gripper at the back. When you put that in, you're going to need to unscrew your valve cap and have a look to make sure there are usually little lines that you have to make these little gouges line up, otherwise your valves will be out of line. The string itself only determines how high the valve sits here, whether it sits up or further down. So that's a string adjustment. But the actual lining up inside the valve is determined by these bumpers. So you want to look and see that when your horn is at rest, when the valve is at rest, it's lining up the line on the internal rotor with the line that's on the cap, and when you press it down, that it's also lining up. That will ensure that when your valve goes from closed to open, that it's actually seating in the right place and not partway over or too far over. Both of those can cause problems with making a beautiful sound, which is what horns do. So that's basic maintenance. I have a few other tricks that I'll pass on, a few other toys, I guess I'll call them. I always like to keep a pencil handy. So on the back of my horn, I have a pencil clip. You can buy this at a music store. It's made to be the right size to fit on the tubing of the horn. I like to use a short pencil because a tall pencil may be touching, if it leans over, may be touching and making a buzz. So I get little golfing pencils, or there are a couple of repairmen who give out these little pencils that have a nice eraser. If you have a golf pencil or something from mini golf, they usually don't have an eraser. Buy an eraser and put it on. That way, if you need to mark something in the music, a cut, or something that you forgot to do, or circle something, you've got that pencil handy. I also have a few more gadgets on my horn. This is a rather old horn, so these valve paddles are fairly thin at the end, and for some of the music that I play, particularly some of the past contemporary music, there's a lot of moving around and it was bothering my fingers. So these are just pencil grips. You can get them at any department store. And you can get whatever color you like. I ended up with some fairly clear ones, and put them over the end of the valves. They don't add anything to the sound. They add to my comfort, and if you want to spruce up your horn a little, you can choose a color that you like. I also have a hand grip here. Some people have just a hand guard, which keeps the moisture, the perspiration from your hand from eating into the metal of the horn. I use the hand grip because at one point I broke a bone in the back of my hand, and it wasn't comfortable for me to have the pinky down in the ring that's provided for that. So I found that with this hand grip, which just velcros on and can adjust as to how big a hand it's going for, I find with that I can support the horn, the weight of the horn, on that hand in conjunction with either this hand or the leg, and these fingers are freer to move. So I have kept it on even though my hand has long since healed. And another tip to pass on, maybe one last tip, is this is my vacation horn. So if I'm going somewhere that I really can't take the horn, but I want to keep playing, or if I want to warm up on my way somewhere and I can't have the horn out, this little piece of tubing makes the mouthpiece a lot more fun. So I could just take the mouthpiece, I could free buzz and warm up the lips that way. I could put it on and buzz that way, but if I put even a short amount of tubing, and this is just tubing from the hardware store that happens to fit the end of my mouthpiece. It begins to feel more like the resistance of the horn. So if you're on vacation, you can play along with the radio, you can do some exercises, you can practice your solo, whatever it is that makes you have fun, and just keep those muscles going. It doesn't hurt to give them a rest, but too long a rest may make it a little harder to get back.